welcome back, everybody. Brandon Steckler, technical editor of Motor Age Magazine. We're back again with another episode of Wrench Tales. And tonight I'm with my really good friend, my old buddy, Corey Bruggeman. Corey's from S&A Auto, based out of Staten Island, New York. He's on the island. Um, Currently, you just got a place in the mountain regions of Pennsylvania. I'm happy to hear. I love it there, but still works on
Thank
the
you.
island. How you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. It's been busy. A lot of
Yeah, I
travel.
bet. Busy's good. Busy people get things done. I know you've been traveling back and forth. That's a long haul. Worth
Yeah,
it though, right?
absolutely, without a doubt.
Awesome. Well, listen, I don't want to waste your time. I know how busy you are. So I really just want to get started on something cool. Corey was recently faced with this Jeep Wrangler with this crazy problem. Um, you know what's funny? The moment you told me about this problem, Corey, is that same week, literally the next day, I got a call from one of our other friends with the almost same identical symptom, same engine and everything. So when I say it's a Jeep thing, I really do understand for sure. So tell me about this truck, this Jeep, excuse me. First of all, Corey does mobile solutions provider for a living. Programming, calibration, diagnostics, configuration. You guys know the whole nine yards. And drivability is one of his fortes. He gets called into a shop for a simple check engine light, right? A P0302, I think it was.
P0302 on a typical Pentastar. How uncommon.
Yeah, right. Walk me through this. Walk me through your mindset when you get this call and you hear the kind of car it is and the problem they're facing they want you to dig into. What's going through your head, honestly?
Well, it's the typical, hey, we have a single so we have a P030 something, and we've already put some parts in it. Maybe they put I don't this particular one, I don't remember what they did, but usually it's we put the injectors in the coils, the plugs, and we still have this issue. Can you come take a look at it? And my immediately, your mind wants to go, hey, I've seen this before. I think I know where I'm going, and then you kind of want to stop yourself and go, don't go down that rabbit hole. Just go fix the car. And that was it. We approached the car. I get the background on whatever they did to it, and it was something. I threw some parts at it, and we key on, engine off, do a full health scan, start collecting some data. Don't even start the car yet. Do all of that stuff just in case it's they tell you it's a 302, but maybe there's 14 other codes they forgot to tell you. So you just go through the steps. Step one, health scan, and go from there. And it had a PO302. It's the only thing it had.
So for me, hearing what you're telling me right now, I'm trying to put myself in your shoes because I've been there a million times. I'm hearing about this DTC. I'm scanning for it. Um, I know there's only several things that could really cause a PCM to flag a single cylinder misfire. Right away in my mind, I have an idea what test I'm going to first. And almost on every single vehicle, regardless of what vehicle it is, it's such an easy test to perform. And either way, whatever the results of that test are, it's going to be yes or no. Um, it's good news for me. Either I'm dealing with an engine mechanical problem, or I am not probably not dealing with engine mechanical problem. You agree with that?
100%. Split it right down the middle. I want to start closing in on the funnel. First step is what can I do to prove one way or the other, knock off half of the problems? Is it mechanical or engine management? And
Yeah,
just
and
like
I know
that,
a lot. Sorry, go ahead.
no, and I real quick, foot to the floor if the car is a clear flood mode, which of course Jeeps do. Almost like they knew we needed it, and do a crank, do a cranking cadence, and I can hear it. I can hear
Yeah,
I can hear the skip, and I went, all right, but let's not jump yet, right? Because at this point, I want to grab the owner and say, hey, we're going down this alley, this path real quick. Is the owner going to want to entertain it? But I said, let's hold off. Let's do a couple more quick tests. I'm only there a couple of minutes so far.
and you know what? I want to jump off for just 2 seconds here, Corey, because there's a lot of younger techs that are watching this and are maybe not yet comfortable with drivability. And don't yet realize the power. What you just said now is that you're not You're not running down there to get started as fast as you can, because that's not how we make money. It's not running around like a chicken without a head. It's making smart moves. So you're going to use a test that's going to give you a lot of information and very little time invested, whether it's time spent on the vehicle taking things apart or time not taking things apart, just testing. This is a real easy test to perform. So I'm getting ready to flip the page and show everybody what you sent me. But when you and I talked about this and you sent me this capture, knowing you only had a P0302, I got to tell you, Corey, I was really surprised at what I see, what I'm about to show them. Were you surprised when you saw it?
And it was, so I had a pause after I do the cranking cadence and I hear it and I went, okay, I'm gonna go get the boss and tell him, hey, we got a mechanical issue. And I said, you know what, let me do one more test. And I got this and I went, oh, I'm glad I did this. I'm glad I took the 5 minutes. It literally takes 5 minutes, 7 minutes, something like that. You know, once you get efficient with it, because you know we want to whatever we can do that's easy. Because the joke is be lazy, do the easy stuff.
Yeah. And for those of you again mentioned that are looking at this for the first time, we call this a relative compression test. So what we have here on one of the scopes channels, Corey has taken an amp probe and he's basically just put it around the battery cable if it's accessible. And on another scope channel, he's back probed what we call a sync, standing for synchronization. And he's back probing one of the cylinders, in this case, cylinder number one's ignition signal, whether it's a coil command from a PCM or an actual spark output from a coil. We just want to know when that happens. And that typically happens very, very, very close to top dead center. And what this blue trace is showing us is that the load being put on the starter is not the same from, in this case, cylinder one. The next cylinder would be the one that follows it in the firing order, which we don't yet know. But it keeps alternating. I'll say high and then low, and then high and then low. And then the process repeats itself over and over again. So what I've drawn here in orange and purple circles is just to indicate what my eyes are showing me, and certainly what Corey has seen when he's evaluated this vehicle. But the point is he hasn't had a need to do any research until now. Until now, all he had to do was hang the tool on the car. And Corey, how long did I know you've done this several times, probably in a
A
week,
few.
maybe several times in a day. How long does this test take for you to do once you know what you're doing? 3, 4, 5 times of doing it.
So it's going to be a bit different for a mobile tech versus a shop tech, because
Fair
I got
enough.
to pull everything. It takes me longer to pull the tool out and set it up and then put it away than it actually takes to do the test. It really does.
Absolutely. So in a shop, I mean, most of us that are watching this are in the bays, right in the trenches, and our scopes, if we're wise and we're using them like we're supposed to, are out on the bench or easily accessible. And honestly, to set this up and perform it, once you get used to doing it a couple of times, 30 seconds to a minute. Is that fair?
Um, including
You,
setup.
when you have it already set up,
Oh, once you set up, it's 30 seconds. I mean, but
30 seconds.
if you're in a shop and you have hopefully you have a diag cart. I hope that you do. If not, something where you can set up the scope and you come in and I hear people say all the time, oh, I go into shops that have scopes and I go, why don't you do this? Oh, it's in the drawer. My leads are tucked away. I go, why? You come in the morning, put the compressor on, turn the coffee on, turn your scope on, have it ready, have it on a boom with the leads hanging out, wheel it over. If that
Listen,
was the case, the whole setup and test on this is 11 minutes. It's something
I
ridiculous.
listen, I got to disagree with you just a little bit.
Go
The
ahead.
coffee part comes on first, then the compressor.
Yes. And then the scope,
I'm
right?
just messing around.
And then the radio. Yeah, of course.
So here's what I'm trying to prove here. My point I'm trying to make, excuse me, is that Corey spent a few minutes on this thing. He already has a sense of direction. He was on the hunt for a single cylinder problem, but this clearly shows a bank to bank issue, meaning three cylinders are lower than the other three as far as load on the starter. And since they alternate, this typically indicates one bank to the other. That's not true in every single case, and I'll show you in a minute. So at this point, Corey definitely has justification to spend a few minutes on a computer looking up some simple things. And here's what we've determined. This V6 engine has cylinders 1, 3, and 5 on one bank, 2, 4, and 6 on the other bank, and it does indeed alternate. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what I'm getting at, this information right here, and this information here tells Corey, as it's telling me, we definitely have a bank-to-bank breathability issue, a differential in how one half of the engine is moving air compared to how the other half of the engine is moving air. And that's really powerful because, again, Corey being a mobile solutions provider, he was not hired to fix this car. It doesn't behoove him to run around now and start throwing wrenches on a cart and impact sockets and torque wrenches, right? And taking everything apart. He stops right now and says to the owner, his client, hey, listen, we definitely have an engine problem. Are we going any further or not? And
Right.
right, that's where you left off at this point, isn't it?
And it's not uncommon. This is a point I get to regularly where I stop. Like I said, I break it down to the what, where, and how. What's broken, where is it broken, and how do we fix it? And I routinely will have to stop and go, hey, this is where I'm at. Do you want me to keep going? I know what the what is. We have to go further, find out where it is, right? And that's kind of where I am. I know what's wrong with it. I don't know where it's broken, and I sure don't know how to fix it yet. So, do we want
Yeah.
to keep going? There's time involved. Is the owner aware? Like, I show up, it's the first hour, and then we need to get some more time approved. So, and I don't want to just be spending people's money, but let's make sure we're going to go forward. The owner has interest in fixing this. And I actually left. For the day. I said, let me know, I'll come back. The shop wasn't far away.
Hmm.
So that's kind of where we are.
Good deal. And I don't want to apologize, but I gotta make a joke here because of the whole Jersey Shore thing. You gotta understand it's the region we're from. I'm born and raised New Jersey. Staten Island is not too far north. So this is like a regional thing, and these guys crack me up. But that's that's why I got this on here. I'm just
And
busting
usually
some stones because
and usually they travel from Staten Island to the shore. So
yeah, that's my point.
yeah.
So
Yes.
anyhow, I'm using this
Well aware.
because our buddy Paulie D is really cocky. How hard could this be, right? So again, I'm thinking the same thing. When Corey called me to show me this stuff, I thought to myself, well, clearly a bank to bank breathability issue, right? This engine being an air pump, one side's moving air differently than the other. That's what the test showed us. In my mind, it's either a jumped timing chain, right? That could cause this problem. Maybe a stuck phaser that would affect an entire bank, or we have a sheared keyway, if they even have one, where the phaser attaches to the camshaft. Corey, I even seen camshafts physically twist, the ones that are
Yep.
pressed together. So through getting my butt kicked, I've learned, believe it or not, I can learn. I've learned to take these things, as lessons learned and things to consider. Always consider the limitations of the test you're performing, what the test shows you, but also what it cannot show you. In my mind, Corey, what's the next logical step? I mean, in your, what are you seeing now? Like, where do we go from here other than tear down?
Well, I actually get the call. And one of the things I left off, I left this out. One of the things I told the owner, I said, let the customer know that, we have to go further with testing. It may mean disassembly. I may have to may have to take the intake off with the valve cover so I can inspect it under the valve cover. Let me know. And he calls me, says, okay, we got approval to go forward. I went ahead and took the intake and the valve cover off. I didn't see anything. So I put it all back together. And I went, no. Oh, okay. All right. So I wish you were either
Oh
not taking it
no.
apart, either not take it apart. If you did leave it apart, so I can look at it. But he put it all back together and said there's nothing wrong with it. I'm like, I don't believe that. And also,
Yep.
let's keep this. And I'm sure people looking at this going, well, if you got a bank to bank issue, why did it only throw a PO 302?
That's what I was thinking too. It
Well,
didn't,
don't.
right? That you got started off chasing a single cylinder problem and you found a whole
And
bank issue.
this is where we always say, don't fight the computer, right? Don't try to overthink it. Like, so what was the code setting criteria? What did it see? Didn't like? You know what? At the end of the day, who cares? Don't think about it too much.
Mhm.
It put us in the
You got
PO
bigger fish to
302
fry.
put us into a direction. We found out there was more to it. Forget the code
Yeah.
now.
Guys, keep in mind, DTCs are thresholds that have been crossed. P0302 is flagged because we set so many recurring misfires to the point that we had to flag a DTC. The other two cylinders on that bank may have been right behind it. You never know. So just
I've
things to
I've
keep in mind.
I,
But
I've I've had Pentasar 3.6s that had a completely dead coil and it wouldn't even throw a misfire code. I don't know why. So
It
don't
depends on, yep.
BMWs constantly misrepresent misfires. They call out the wrong cylinder. So
Oh boy,
it's
we
they
still
have
have
a
those
bulletin on
problems,
it.
huh?
Yeah, they have bulletins on it. So it's the point is don't get stuck on the code. It's just let it put you in a direction, then forget it.
Unbelievable. So in my mind here, again, what is the fastest way to prove out if we have a jump timing chain? A stuck phaser we can't really see without disassembly or without further testing, and I'll point that out in a second. I'm not there yet. I want to point that out in a second. Same with sheared locator. Can we see both of these, the second and the third bullet point? Yeah, there's further, more intrusive testing we can do. But a jump
And
timing chain, we
what's
don't have to
easiest?
be intrusive. Yeah. So if we were to back probe or pierce probe, whatever, if we acquire the signals from the intake camshaft from our suspect bank two, where cylinder number two is housed, or I'm sorry, where our where cylinder number two is housed, and the exhaust cam for bank two, and our crank signal, we can easily see if any of these camshafts lost their point of reference relative to the crankshaft. And although this picture does not show it, Corey did compare this to what we call a known good waveform, and they were pretty much identical.
Mhm.
So we don't believe that there's a cam timing issue. Now, I do have to say, um, considering those test limitations, what I love is that this test really does tell us if our camshaft and our crankshaft lost correlation, like if the chain was stretched or jumped a tooth or several teeth. That's easy to see. I like this test because there's no disassembly. Typically, it's very easy to perform, very easy to get to, whether you're at the sensors or you're acquiring this data from the computer. That's why I like this test. But again, considering the limitations of this test, we are looking at the timing signals here, and these signals come from reluctors that are somehow pressed on, bolted, referenced to a specific point on the camshafts. Well, we are truly looking at the signals. If the reluctors that generate those signals had lost their point of reference, it'd be equivalent of you and I using a tape measure. And every time I plant the tape measure and you stretch it out over a certain distance, I let my foot off the tape measure and it loses its point of reference. That doesn't do us any good. So what I'm getting at is if there was something mechanically wrong with the timing signal, what we call reluctors, the toothed wheel that generates the signal, or the camshaft was somehow twisted, or a keyway was sheared, the signals would still look good, but we could still have that problem. So again, what I mean by that is if the timing here indicated it was off, we know it's off. However, if the timing shows it's on, as it does right now for us, it could still mean that it's off. Now, this next picture I want to point out, I mean, obviously, what's the answer? Oh, I don't know. Let's take it apart, right? Well, look at
And
this. I mean,
let me back up 1 second, Brendan, if I can.
please.
An important note, especially for the newer guys. One more slide back. We did this whole test, and it turned out it wasn't the issue. So, and I see guys, myself included, for a long time, I would do a test that I thought needed to be, I thought it was it, and it wasn't it, and then you go, I just wasted time. But the truth of the matter is, if it's a valid test to help you get down that path to the answer, even if the test comes back negative, whether it be compression test or cam crank correlation or whatever it is, as long as it was justified, then you didn't waste your time. I see guys get frustrated, like, I wasted all this time. No, it was a good test. You didn't waste any time. That's part of the job. So
For
I just
sure.
I don't want guys to get sideways. They see this, like, I did this test and it didn't work out. It's not it. Well, okay, but you
Yeah.
had to do it. So
This every test isn't the results of the test are an answer to a question. Are my timing signals off? They are not. It doesn't mean you did this test for no reason. The test does tell you something. It says that your signals are where they're supposed to be. So again, people sometimes get to the point like, you know what, you're as far as you can go. Let's take it apart. Well, this bank is bank. Oh, is this
would be
bank one?
awesome.
I can't remember.
That's bank one. That would be awesome if that was the problem side.
Right, of course. Anytime you have a problem cylinder, it's never the accessible one. It's always the one under the intake manifold.
And
So
I
am I
believe
going to say
And I believe you even asked me, you said, hey, can we go in cylinder? And I went, nope, wrong side. You know, we have to take
That's what
the
I was
intake. Yeah,
getting
we
at.
can't. We can. I'm sorry, Dan. I'm sorry to cut you off. I just go ahead.
No, you're
I got a
absolutely
hit.
right. No, I was going to say I could back up the results of this test. No, this proves the timing signals are on. Again, could it be a sheared keyway now? It absolutely could. How would we back up that? Well, a in-cylinder pressure test, in-cylinder pressure transducer test, acquiring and analyzing pressure waveforms would prove whether or not it was a sheared key or timing was even off. But as I mentioned that, um, where Corey has to go is beneath this manifold, which means more disassembly again. So at this point, we got to ask ourselves, can we go any further? We can't go in cylinder. We pretty much think our cam is in time. It's certainly not sheared. Sorry, it's the relative compression test shows a breathability issue. Our timing shows it's on. So if it is a breathability issue, it's related to an entire bank. It has to be camshaft timing. However, however, this vehicle has another system in it. Not every vehicle has this, and more vehicles are utilizing this strategy now, but we can vary the breathability further in this engine through variable valve lift and duration. And by duration, I mean how long a valve is held open before it closes again. That's what I mean by duration. And that, of course, affects breathability as well. I look at the intake valve as the trap door. If we leave the trap door open longer, it's going to reduce compression. If we close the trap door sooner, it's going to increase compression. So knowing that, there's certain things we have to consider now. It kind of infers right now that our cam timing is not the issue, but we definitely have a breathability issue, and it gives us further reason to investigate an engine mechanical fault without disassembly. And Corey came up with this great idea. What about a cranking intake vacuum trace? It will kind of help infer further. And you know what? Some people might say, yeah, but you already know there's a breathability problem. Well, yeah, we're pretty sure it has a breathability problem, but we're also pretty sure that the cam timing hasn't jumped. This would be not hard to do. It
Wow,
would not take
that was the home run right there. It's an easy test. I could do this in a minute. I'm already hooked up.
so easy. We don't have to take anything apart at all. Very similar to relative compression test, and it'll give us another what I like to call arrow in the target towards what it is we're seeking. You hear the old saying, if it walks like a duck and sounds like a duck, it's a duck. It's kind of like that. This would be a second thing, a second piece of test data condemning what we already think is wrong. And if I've got all these fingers pointing to the same bad problem, I feel a lot more confident. So it's well worth the time to do this. See, Corey acquires this, and what do we got here, Corey? You wanna point me to what you see going on in the screen?
We it's well, actually it's so, and I want to reference, we're talking about vacuum. This is not an absolute sensor, it's a delta sensor. So it just changed. We're watching momentary differences in vacuum or pressure in the intake. So every time the piston comes down, we're seeing the pull on the pressure transducer.
Yep, that's that.
And we're seeing uneven pulls. And actually, is that inverted? Why do I
It's
think that's
not
inverted?
inverted. What we're showing here is, as Corey mentioned, the poles are every time a piston comes down on the induction stroke. If we take this sensor that he's using, this delta sensor, we connect it to the intake manifold on the vacuum port, we can see the pressure dropping, a change in pressure every time a piston comes down. And they're all contributing the same to the intake manifold. But the point is, what we have here that I circled in these different colors, different color circles here, indicates where an intake valve opens relative to a reference point. So what I did was, just like the relative compression test, we referenced this trace from number one coil spark to number one coil spark. That's a full engine cycle, 720 degrees. And we used over here a partitions tool to break this up into 6 equal segments. And this is, we chose 6 because this is 6 cylinders. The question we have to ask ourselves is each one of these cylinders contributing the same to the intake manifold as the others? And what we can clearly see is, although they were all pulling on the intake manifold relatively evenly, what we do see though is if you were to look at the distance between where my pointer finger is to this pointer finger, this cursor here, there's a span, there's a difference here, a space, if you will. The space for all the orange circles is smaller. The gap is smaller from here to here than from here to here. And it's the same every time. So what this further infers here is, yes, it proves we had a bank-to-bank breathability issue, but it also proves the opening of the intake valves, the timing of the intake valves is different from one bank. If we think about one side of the engine, we'll just focus on one thing, the closing of the intake valve. Again, if we close the intake valve sooner, we build more pressure in the cylinder. If we close the intake valve later, we build less pressure in the cylinder. Why? Because more of the air is being forced back into the intake manifold before the valve closes. So if we force more air back into the intake manifold, the peak you see here is going to be taller. So this is more air into the manifold versus less air being forced into the manifold. And this variation right here infers the timing of the intake valve closing. That's what I'm getting at. So we've inferred we definitely have a bank-to-bank breathability issue. And again, this pretty much conflicts what our camshaft crankshaft correlation waveform shows us, further inferring it's not a jumped cam timing issue, but more likely a breathability issue due to the fact that we have this variable system, this variable compression ratio system. So we had to do some research. And listen, don't be ashamed of doing research. In fact, I commend you for it. To this day, almost every day, I get calls on the phone for technical assistance, literally from all over the world. And it's a very rare occurrence that I am not doing some kind of research. Even as experienced as I am, I've got about 27 years in this industry. I have to research. That's part of the job. You can't know it all. You shouldn't want to know it all, because if you think you know it all, there's going to be something new that comes out tomorrow. So what did we learn about this car, Corey? About how this car varies breathability from cylinder to cylinder, or in the same cylinder?
So what they use is they use two cylinders on each bank, two solenoids on each bank to control this variable valve lift system. And what they'll do is one solenoid controls two cylinders and one solenoid controls one cylinder, which is kind of an odd way to do it, but some engineer thought this was a good idea. So rather than have one solenoid for each cylinder or one for the whole bank, they went and split it up. So keep that in mind. We got one cylinder for cylinders, in this case, 2 and 4. And did I say cylinder again? One solenoid for cylinders 2 and 4, and one solenoid for cylinder 6. And the same thing on the other side.
So I'm going to show you some more research we did, but if you were to look at this, what happens is normally at rest, this pin you see here is exactly how it's drawn right now, meaning this dark gray portion of this rocker assembly is mechanically linked to this light gray portion. So what happens is, as the camshaft rolls around, the camshaft pushes down on this. And with this pin locked, the moment the camshaft push on this, the entire rocker assembly moves. Now, when this system is, I'll use the word energized or activated or called upon, when we energize these solenoids, these high side driven solenoids, the solenoids are going to open, and they're going to let hydraulic pressurized engine oil come into the hydraulic routing here, right through this hole, and the oil is going to push this way, and it's going to move this pin. Let me see if I can zoom in on this further. It's going to move this pin in this direction against spring pressure, and if you look closely, it will disassociate the dark gray from the light gray portion. So what happens is the camshaft will push down on the light gray. The light gray will move, but there will be a lost motion there between the light gray and the dark gray. Once this light gray component bottoms out here on this orange pin, then it moves at a very low lift and duration. So the swing of the rocker is exactly the same. How much travel the valve moves is what changes. And it's all done through hydraulic control right here. So a couple of questions we have to understand, we need to take into account, we have to ask ourselves is A, when these solenoids, first of all, are these high or low side driven solenoids? These are high side driven solenoids, meaning we send voltage to a solenoid that is always grounded, and that's what allows it to work. These could be low side driven solenoids in another configuration, meaning voltage is available at all times, and we provide a ground path by energizing a transistor or closing a switch, and they'd function the same. But you have to understand the circuit so we know how to test for it if we were to do that test. Now, something else to keep in mind, Corey mentioned something that's pretty important, and to the lay person or someone without this diagnostic experience, it might go in one ear and out the other. There's two solenoids for each bank. One solenoid controls these two valves, these two sets of valves, and the other solenoid controls that. So factoring in just one bank, the only bank we're concerned with, Corey, doesn't it mean that we would have to have, if we had a problem with this system, we would have to have either two faulty solenoids, or both solenoids have a shorted circuit, or both solenoids have an open circuit, or both solenoids are physically stuck? Isn't that what would have to happen?
And that's, as you were explaining it, I'm like, I wanted to jump up and go, but we don't care. Not that we don't care how it works. In this case, we don't care because it's not our issue. And that's kind of like, right, we want to be, we always say three important things from every class you attend and every seminar. You want to learn to be faster, you want to be accurate, you want to be least intrusive as possible. When I see two solenoids controlling one bank, I immediately go, I'm going to slide into a rabbit hole because there's no way, like you just said, there's either two bad solenoids or not. And I want to say not electrical, because if it was a circuit issue, it would be it would be both banks or one,
Yeah.
not two. That's convenient, right? And then there's another piece
Yep.
of information.
Yeah. And we've got more info here. First of all, so here's a better picture, a more realistic picture. Here's one solenoid that controls these two sets of valves, and this solenoid controls the set of valves over here. And the same, this one controls these two, and then this one controls this one here. So this is our problem bank. All three cylinders on this bank are showing that problem. Our relative compression test showed us, and our cranking vacuum test showed us, which would mean if we did truly have a hydraulic issue with this system, we'd either have two shorted solenoids, or two stuck drivers, or two hydraulically, physically open, stuck open solenoids. And that, I'm not saying it's impossible, but the chances of that happening are unlikely, are very low on our list of potential suspects. So with that, I would normally mention to somebody, hey, let's go test the electrical circuitry. But Corey, is it even worth it at this point? It doesn't make sense, does it?
Move on. Move
Yeah, it
on.
doesn't, because it almost cannot be an electrical problem. Now, here's something else that's very interesting, and some people also don't pay mind to this. When I see a system like this, my assumption is this. Hear me out. This is my assumption at first thought. I have a normal running engine, and then when I call for this system to work, the engine runs at a higher performance. Why do I assume that? Because for years I've worked with Honda Acura vehicles, and VTEC system, at least the initial ones, called for more performance. This system does not work that way. It works the opposite. We have a normal running engine, and when we call upon this variable valve lift system to come into play, when we energize a solenoid, we make the engine run, I don't want to say worse, but we reduce its power output. This is a system built for economy. So if you read this, to enter low lift mode, we would have to energize the system. And again, not that this is necessary in this exact scenario, because since we have a problem with an entire bank, we are not dealing with an electrical problem. But if we were dealing with a single, let's say a single solenoid, we would need to know if the solenoid is supposed to be on at idle, or it's not supposed to be on an idle. And that's where reading service information like this comes into play. So again, to recap, would an electrical test help us? It could in some scenarios. In this one, it doesn't make sense because, doing the math, I should say, putting what we know together, the fact that all three cylinders are affected, it's unlikely an electrical fault because that would mean we'd have two electrical faults, and that's not the case. But here, the best part I think about working on newer vehicles, Corey, is two things. One, the information we have at our fingertips now, right? We can get so much info from sitting in the driver's seat, looking at scan data. It's so I'll use the word robust now and sophisticated. It's a lot
And
easier than working.
Lord knows I'm lazy, so I like doing that.
Shit, I hear you
If there
that.
was a if there was an award, I'd win it.
And here's the best part that further infers we don't have to test for an electrical fault. As I mentioned, the sophistication of the software, the detection circuitry involved will allow us to see if we had an open circuit or a short circuit or anything like that. So the fact that we don't even have a DTC, I'm not saying it's impossible to have a circuit issue, but if you add up all the clues we've gathered so far, like Sherlock Holmes or Columbo, it's just one more thing, right? We don't have to go down this road. It just doesn't make sense to. Now, at this point, I think you pretty much summed it up, Corey. It's time to
You
come
went from
apart.
Jersey Shore to Colombo. You know that, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
I cover the
You're
entire domain of
you're
genres.
eclectic. You're
I
eclectic.
am.
Yes.
Um, let's take this thing apart, right? Like I said, if it walks like a duck and sounds like a duck, it's a duck. And that's
Now we're
part of
at
your
the
job.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, we have all the information we need to condemn this for mechanical fault. Confidence is high. It's time to take it apart and point to the problem. Now I know the shop owner is probably sweating this one
And
out or ready to prove you wrong, right? Because we've
and
had it apart.
and here's the other one. The shop owner said he took it apart and inspected it. Looked fine. Do we take that for gospel?
Hey, you know what? If we were riding on emotions only, like I used to, I'd say, you know what? I like this guy. I trust him. Yeah, it's probably nothing, but the data does not lie, right? We say it all the time.
Yep.
I make decisions like a scientist now. Like it or not, we're all scientists. You hear me say that a lot now. So Corey's got a video for us here. I'm going to walk you through what we found on this video. Corey would run this video and he's manipulating the rockers with his fingers. He could literally push down on the rockers and collapse them just like this with his finger, proving that they're disengaged. Now, if you went back to this screen here where we described how this system works, high lift mode is the default, right? That's a normal running engine. High lift is not high performance. High lift is normal. Low lift is reduced performance. So the default is high, meaning that rocker, we go back again, that rocker, this is the default position, should be locked. Corey's going to push on this and he can move them with his fingers, meaning this has to be unlocked. And of course, with the engine off, there's no oil pressure anyway. So it would have to be physically stuck, physically disengaged. And we have to ask ourselves why. And here's the reason I mention this. Because to this point, Corey did his job flawlessly. And even if he told the customer, you need rockers, they're physically stuck, that's his job as well. He did the diagnosis. But I don't think the customer would be too happy if the customer, I should say the client, the shop owner, agreed to go ahead and put the rockers in, because we have to consider the why factor. Why are these rockers stuck? What would cause a rocker to physically stick? Could they just break? Yeah, like I said, it's a Jeep thing. I definitely understand. And of course, I'm just making a joke, kind of. But my point is, yes, there are common failures we see among certain platforms, and seeing valve train issues on some of these Pentastars does not surprise me whatsoever. But we do have to factor in what caused it to fail. So we know they operate hydraulically through pressurized oil. Could we have a oil starvation issue, like we ran low on oil and something physically got hot or physically damaged where it's now binding? It's not a power surface anymore. Could we have an oil restriction where pressurized oil got in and cannot escape? Possible, yeah, but right now the engine's off. Excuse me. The engine's off, so that's unlikely, the issue. And could it be a loss of pressure? In this case, no. because it takes pressure to disengage it, and we are stuck in the disengaged phase. So we're still wondering why, but keeping your eyes open and doing a thorough visual inspection is never a bad idea. And you know what? In this case, Corey, it paid off, didn't it?
Yeah, it
What we
did.
got here, buddy?
We had some pitting on the left, on that left picture. We have some pitting on the camshaft, and then you have to ask yourself, hey, where'd that metal go?
Yeah.
And why
The
is it
the
pitted? What made it? What? Oh, now we got more whys. Why did it pit? Is it just bad metal? Do we have an oiling issue? Again, oil starvation, oil restriction issue. Where'd that metal go? And then we have the picture on the right, which is those are
oh,
those. That's a little bit of bluing. When I say a little bit, they were black and blue.
geez.
There was
So they
definitely
got hot.
there's yeah, they got real hot. There was definitely some kind of starvation issue in here. Not everything, because you can see at the picture on the left, actually everything looked okay. Color wise, it looked fine. But then when you look
Mhm.
down into the rockers, the roller part of the rockers were just some were blue. They I was literally
Oh,
trying to scrape it off. In fact, I think you can see the marks in it. I was trying to take my screwdriver. I was trying to see if it was just gunk or if it was actually
yeah.
blued. And no, it was blued. Not all of them, but a
Oh,
good amount of them. Yeah, it was, and that's that was enough.
yeah. And here's the point. Again, he is a solutions provider. We'll call him sometimes a mobile diagnostician, but yeah, can he stop at the diagnosis? It needs rockers. It does need rockers. However, why did the rockers fail? If the shop owner had put rockers in, this thing may have left the shop okay, may not. It may have been junk from the moment he started it. It may run fine for a week, a month, 6 months, a year, but this engine's not going to heal. It's not going to get any better. It's only going to get worse. So the wise call would be to replace the engine as a unit. And please, if you wouldn't mind, Corey, because that was phenomenal. And again, sorry if I'm offending you, but hey, it's a regional thing.
No, that's awesome.
It's it's exciting when we come up with something like that. You know what I mean? The part that kind of bothered me is when you crank this engine over, clearly the relative compression test and the cranking vacuum waveform showed us a bank-to-bank breathability, meaning three cylinders were doing one thing, and the other three cylinders were doing another thing. However, when you took it apart, you were only ever able to push down on one of the rockers. Is
On
that
the
two
number
of them?
two cylinder, yeah, the number
So
two lifters are the ones that I can collapse. So I know what you, so the
gotcha.
question was, yes, the question was, why wasn't that represented in the vacuum waveform?
Yeah, I two things. One, either the cam wasn't in a position that would have allowed that rocker to relax, the ones that you were pushing on, maybe they were already loaded. Or
Nope.
two,
Unloaded. They wouldn't just
unloaded, they were
cylinder
still
two.
there.
Yep.
Okay, gotcha. The only other thing I could think of, clearly they were breathing the same, meaning all three cylinders on one bank. Um, Maybe at the point you took the engine apart, it had enough time to sit, the oil leaked out of the lifters and they collapsed a bit. I truly don't know, but the
I
waveform
don't.
proves that they were breathing similarly. So
And we could have went further and figured that out, but unfortunately, you get to a point where they just go, okay, that's enough, and they send me on my way, they pay me, and I go on my way, and I don't know what happens after that. But we get to have discussions like this and try to play with the answers that we couldn't get while I was at the job, right? And that's the important part. Sometimes even in the shop, you'll get to a point where the customer says, okay, stop, that's enough. I'm not going to do it. Either they don't want to put the money into it, or they just pull the car, and
yeah,
you're left going, well, how come? Because we want to know why, right? It's not a silver bullet thing. I want to know why it broke, and how do I troubleshoot that better next time, faster.
for sure. Listen, my friend, I do want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time. First of all, it's always good to talk to you. I'm glad we got to meet up a few weeks ago at Super Saturday. That's another fist bump, right? Um, and like I said, really good to hear from you. Thank you for telling this story. This is a good one. This is very important. I appreciate you
I
sharing your
appreciate
knowledge with us.
I appreciate you guys. Everybody listening, get to the training. Take it from somebody that's doing this longer than Brandon. Um, this wasn't around years ago. I wish it was. The training that we have today, the availability of the instructors that you can talk to that are approachable, and the networking that goes on at these events. I wouldn't be half of what I am without you, people like you, and all the instructors at these events. So, guys, just go to the events. Don't hesitate. Just go to at least one and see what it's like.
Thanks, Corey. I appreciate the support, my friend, and the kind words. Well, guys, Corey Bruggeman, my good buddy, S&A Auto out in Staten Island. Again, Corey, thanks for taking the time. We'll see all you guys next time on the next episode of Wrench Tales. Do me a favor, if you enjoy this, like, comment, subscribe, give us your feedback, ask us some questions, ask Corey some questions. And Corey's on YouTube as well, S&A Auto. I know you're not as active as you used to be because now you actually got to work for a living, Corey. But
Yeah.
still great stuff on there. We'll see all you next time. Thanks again. Take care, Corey.
Bye-bye.